Time of this podcast, we continue and we will probably continue to be in a COVID-19 situation for a minute. And I don't know about you all, but I wake every morning and I do my best to stay positive, do my best to stay in somewhat of a routine, but a flexible routine, and even learning some things in that as well. We've been so conditioned to so many things. For example, well, I'll just share this real quickly. For example, our 9 to 5 jobs. Now, granted, yes, we need jobs. We have to provide for ourselves. I get all that, but we've been so conditioned to that time frame. That 9 to 5 time frame. And, for a few weeks I was kind of struggling because, I might have slept in a little bit later, maybe got up a little bit later, then wound up working a little bit later. But, I kind of had this internal anxiety, this internal anxiousness, like, I'm not technically on the clock at 9 o'clock. Any of you feeling that way? Am I making sense? So out of that, what came out of that for me was we have been so conditioned to that time frame that perhaps some of us are finding that another time frame works better for us. Some of us might work better from noon to 8 p.m., or some of us might work better from 1 o'clock in the afternoon to 9 o'clock at night, or some of us might work better from, the 3 to 11 or somewhere around that time. Point being, as long as you get your work done, for those of you who are working from home and can have that flexibility, as long as you're getting your work done, don't stress yourself out about a specific time frame. Some of you, yes, granted, I know you have to clock in at a certain time and clock out, and I understand that. But even with that, just be gentle with yourself a little bit, because this is a totally different environment, that we're in. This is a totally different situation. So we all have to kind of be gentle with ourselves. And in the process of dealing with this situation, we find ourselves faced with making decisions about, what we will do in 3 months, or making decisions about, what the rest of our lives will look like, or what adjustments we have to make. And, I have been watching and following Governor Andrew Cuomo from New York. Now, this is by no means any political plug or anything of that nature, but just stay with me. And I've been watching and just observing his demeanor. He's very clear when he talks. He's very, very distinct when he talks. He's very specific, and he's very honest. If he has an answer, he'll answer. If he doesn't have an answer, he'll indicate that he doesn't have an answer and that he will have to follow up once he obtains more information. And I find that to be very admirable. I was watching him he was having one of his press conferences, and they were asking him about when will New York City open back up. Of course, they're pressing him for a date. And, on one occasion, he deferred to something that Dr. Fauci has said. And for those of you who may not know who that is, he's one of the leading experts that is being consulted during this time. And again, very direct, very straightforward, very honest with answers. And, Dr. Fauci said that the virus will determine when we reopen. It was something to that effect. The virus will determine when we reopen. So as people are pressing the governor for a hardcore date, some may feel that he's being evasive by not doing so. But what I heard and what I saw today made sense. He can't give a hardcore date. There's so many things that need to be considered. He was talking today about the subway system in New York City and the buses, the trains and the buses. Now, any of you that have ever been to New York and been in the subway know that that is just a very intricate part of that city. There's like a whole world underground in that subway. You know, all of the different trains and all of the different areas that they go to in the boroughs and so forth. So he was saying, you know, before we open, we've got to figure this transportation thing out. You know, we've got to make sure that the entire subway system, the entire bus system in New York City is sanitized each and every night. And how is that going to happen? We have to come up with a plan. How is that going to happen? So he was asking the transit system to give him a plan within the next 24, 48 hours, something to that effect, of how they're going to sanitize the whole system each and every night. So when people get on the train in the morning to go to work, healthcare providers, first responders, they will know that that entire subway system has been sanitized. That's a huge undertaking, but I see his point. It's a necessary undertaking. The other thing he was inquiring about, looking for information, requesting reports from the police department, the fire department, the EMTs to see how many of them are sick. You can't open a city as large as New York without your law enforcement, without your fire team, without your EMTs. You know, you can't open the city and people begin to go back to work without all of those children having some place to go. So now also we're looking at opening the schools, and which in turn there needs to be a plan of how that will happen. There's so many layers to all of these different things. The transit system, there are layers to reopening properly. The school system, there are layers to reopening, properly. The law enforcement, the firemen, the EMT, there are layers to making sure that there's enough of a force in place for the city to open. So I'm saying all that to say, when it comes to making decisions, thus far I've seen him use sound judgment, and it to me it speaks to him really thinking it through. You know, there are a lot of details, there are a lot of things to be considered, there are a lot of layers to be considered, because part of it too is determining human behavior, or part of it is dependent upon human behavior and just how people will behave, in the process. Will they follow the rules? If they don't follow the rules, they predict we'll be right back where we are, or in some instances even worse. So I'm utilizing that example as part of my discussion this evening, talking about making decisions. We all have to make decisions in life. Whether you are listening to this during this pandemic season, whether you are listening to this on the other side of this pandemic season, sound, wise, discerning decision making is so vital for all of our lives, because the decisions that we make not only affect us, but they affect the people in our lives, or the people that will be involved. I used to tell my students, all the time, I used to tell them, when you make a decision, you automatically inherit the consequence of that decision, whether it's a positive consequence, whether it's a negative consequence, whether it's a known consequence or an unknown consequence. You automatically inherit the consequence of the choice or the decision that you make, which further emphasizes the importance of taking time to make good, sound decisions. So I have 7 suggestions for you. I think I told you I'll get paper and pencil, right? I got 7 suggestions for you. This is not a complete list, y'all. They're just suggestions. Take what you can take, utilize what you can utilize, and the rest You can share with someone else or toss to the wind. All right. So the first one, number one, and I always start when I'm going through these types of lists and things. I always start with prayer, asking for wisdom, asking for guidance, asking for discernment when I'm making decisions. Lord, giving me wisdom, giving me guidance, giving me discernment, so I can utilize the information that I receive to make the best possible decision that I can make. That is so very important. Whatever your prayer life looks like, your meditative life looks like, whatever that looks like, get into that space first, to quiet yourself, to center yourself, to focus, calm yourself, to focus when it comes to making decisions. So many of us just rush into decisions, and then, we don't want to deal with the consequences, or we regret it later. Number two, research. Research. There is so much information out there. You can Google just about anything. You can YouTube just about anything. Find the facts, the real facts. How do you find facts? How do you know what's true and what's not true? Hey, that's a good question. But if you're researching something and you are getting the same information or similar information over and over, chances are, that might be a fact. That might be something, solid information that you can utilize to make whatever the decision is that you have to make. Who has been through that same situation before? And who has come out on the other side? Who do you see that has come out on the other side successfully or victoriously? Sit down and have a conversation with them. If you can't sit down and have a conversation, write, call, text, communicate with them. What were the steps that they took in making this similar decision? What did they go through? What did they deal with? What did they have to consider? All of those things. That information can be so incredibly valuable. We do it sometimes. We say, for example, we are interested in buying a certain car, and we see somebody with that car, and we may ask them a lot of questions, how much, and how does it drive, and what were the pros and cons, and what are the feet, all of those things. We kind of pick their brain to gather that information, to get that information, to help us make a decision. So regardless of whatever the decision is, if someone that has gone through a similar circumstance, seek their guidance, and someone that you trust, that's sound, that's logical, that, has their head on straight, that will be able to give you some input. Granted, this particular situation that we're going through right now, no one has been through it before. So if there's a decision that you're having to make within this particular situation that we're in, for example, do I return to the gym, or do I go to the beauty parlor, or do I, whatever it is, we're as I say, we're all in this together, and this is new for all of us, but based on the information that has been presented to you, pros and cons, you've got to make the best choices and the best decisions for yourself and for your family. I'm not telling you what to do one way or the other. I've got to make decisions for myself, make decisions for my family, what I feel is in their best interest and what I feel is in my best interest, looking logically, using common sense, being competent, intelligent. Y'all know all of those things and helping you make a sound decision.